All right, hello everyone, and it is Wednesday evening again, first Wednesday of the month, and that means it's time for our open space to just talk about open badges for people who are working on open badges projects in New Zealand and Australia. So welcome, my name is Joyce Seitzinger, and I'm one of the co-facilitators for this group, and I work as an education technologist, currently doing a part-time project at La Trobe. I also run my own company called Academic Tribe. The other people in the room currently are Bron Stuckey. Bron, you want to just introduce yourself? Oh, wait, you're muted.
Cool. Hi, I'm Bron Stuckey. I'm a consultant in learning communities and games, gamification, and all things juicy that surround that. So when I work in projects looking at how to use game-inspired aspects in open badges.
Wonderful. And Richard, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself? And I think you're muted at the moment.
Yep, okay. My name's Richard Jones. So I'm living and working in New Zealand. I'm an e-learning specialist over here. I'm working a little bit with Joyce. I have an interest in open badges, but I haven't really done much yet, but okay. One of these days, we'll get something done.
Definitely, I'm keen to get my hands on that first open badge project as well. And Tara, you managed to find us and you managed to join us. Do you want to just quickly introduce yourself? And you're just muted, so you'll just need to unmute yourself.
Kia ora, I'm Tara Fagan. I'm with Core Education in New Zealand and Wellington. And thank you for the invite, whoever sent it through. It was great to be able to connect and get on. So I'm here now. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful to have you on. Wonderful to have some Kiwis on. I do miss New Zealand. So just great. So today is our open space kind of thing. So just a little bit for those people who might be, attending for the first time, or people who are listening to this after the event, which is that we basically run 2 calls every month. The first one is an open space call for anyone to put forward any topics that they've got questions about, or little questions or themes they want to discuss. And the second one so that's on the first Wednesday of the month, and the second one is on the third Wednesday of every month, and that is always a case study where we talk to someone about what they're working on, and listen to them and ask them all of the questions, because we're all thinking about our own projects. As always, we have a Mopad, which is a collaborative note-taking tool, where a virtual chat can be happening, and where we also do collaborative note-taking as the meeting goes on, so people can share links, people can quickly capture what the speakers are saying, and that just becomes a little bit of an archive for us that we can build on as we meet each month, and people can go back and find all of that juicy information. So today's event, Bron had an idea about how to run today. So I'm going to give it over to Bron, because she's given us a little bit of homework, but she's also got some questions to ask us. So Bron, can I just give it to you?
Sure. And I hope someone might drop the link to the video in the chat. We posted a link to just a very short 5-minute video of a number of people who were involved in the Cities of Learning or the Summer of Learning projects that used open badges. And there's a lot of very interesting statements in there, and we thought, well, perhaps this 5-minute video could be a really good trigger for discussion about the issues that it raises. And so that's where we're going to go, having a look at that and see what issues people might have had. So maybe if we each just gave a summary of what we thought of the 5-minute video. I personally think that it's a lot of very positive motherhood statements, and I think it's a lot of the things that we would wish for learning are presented. I think that there are some of the things that are raised there that I really would like to question, and I'm a great advocate for open badges. So what were your thoughts when you watched it, Richard? Your overall thoughts?
You have caught me absolutely on the hop because I haven't watched it, and now I'm really, really embarrassed because I only saw the link just before I came on air, so I didn't really have time to watch it, getting my stuff ready. So I think Joyce should probably kick me out and put in somebody who has watched it.
No. Can we show the video, Joyce? Can we project the video over the Hangout?
I think we can. Yes, because we've got a little Google button, YouTube button here. And so we should be able to select an account. That would be me. And
so we can come back to you, Richard, in a few minutes. It's only a 5-minute video.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm opening YouTube right now. So this is an app within an app. Welcome to YouTube and Hangouts, blah, blah, blah.
This can't work.
Who knows?
Well, the link is in the chat, and I'll put it. Make sure it's in the chat in the Mopad as well. So anyone else who's on the Mopad who might want to jump on can get to it there as well. But it is worth watching.
Yeah, how long has this video been around, Bron? When was it put together?
I think it's last year. It's not all that recent, although it's some very interesting people speaking on it. So it covers higher education, school education, workforce learning, big grant funding, so MacArthur Foundation, and the government's perspective on it. So I think it's an interesting one because it does have so many diverse perspectives. So did we work out if we can show it? Hi, Blair.
Hello.
Hi, we're just trying to see if we can show the video over the Hangout so that everyone's on the same page having watched the little 5-minute video.
All right, guys. So that's like.
Sorry, we had a lag there, Joyce. We missed what you said.
Sorry, Bron, that is actually playing for me, and I'm not sure whether you guys are seeing that or not. So I'm going to get rid of this somehow, and I'm not quite sure how. All right. So that was playing for me, but I'm not sure that it was playing for you guys on the YouTube, whether you were seeing that or not.
I didn't see it.
So that was playing, and that was what was interrupting our chat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and Tara's saying that she saw bits of it, so that's interesting. Hi, Blair. Welcome.
In the back of my mind, I have I remember some kind of glitch with Hangout Live and projecting video. So, I mean, I can talk while people watch the video in the background. We've put the link in the chat in the Hangout, and it's also in the chat in the Mopad. So if people want to get into the video and watch it while I prattle on maybe in the background if you haven't seen it. While that's happening, I can tell you a little bit about something I went to yesterday maybe just to fill in while if people want to take a couple of minutes to watch the video. There was an event at Wollongong University, and there's one in Queensland tomorrow. And let me just get up so I know the exact title of the event. which was really interesting series of presentations about open badges from people both in the room and people external at other activities. And I'm just bringing up my notes so I have it all correct. And there's another version of that event running tomorrow in Brisbane. And we, of course, can't all zap up to Brisbane straight away to watch it. But what I did discover was that they ran an online version of it. And I'm just going to see if I can get the link to put in the chat so you can join the event virtually tomorrow morning if you are interested. And they looked like they were having some quite juicy discussion over the, I think they were using the Janison platform from Deakin. So it was, you know, probably something if you've got a little bit of spare time you could pop in and out of tomorrow morning that I found really interesting. So it was well worth getting into. And I'm just trying to get back into my Eventbrite link so I can give you the right information for that. So I'm just pulling up things here all over the place, trying to make sure I'm a little less of an prattler. But yes, the event's called Curate, Credential and Carry Forward. And I'll just give you put it into the chat, appropriate chat, wherever we are, so that people can, I'll put it in here in that's the name of the event. And if you search in Eventbrite, you should be able to bring up the Queensland version of that event. And yeah, so
yeah. So while you're doing that, so this is part of an OLT grant. So this is the university level funding for them to explore how badges can be used in to credential learning in higher education institutions. And this is Kate, who's leading that project. This is the one who actually joined us at the last call to talk about this particular project and how they are implementing it at university level. And they'll be running a big conference at the end of the year, or symposium, I think it is, at the November 13th, I believe, which will be taking place here in Melbourne. And so I'm definitely going to try to go, and I think Ron's going to maybe try to come over from Sydney as well and come along. So that'll be really interesting, and I'm wondering whether it would actually be interesting for people in New Zealand as well, Tara, to if it hasn't been advertised very widely there.
I know Kate said registrations for that big event open next week, and I do believe, if I heard correctly in the meeting yesterday, that it may be limited to something like 200 people. So, we'll certainly make sure everyone hears about it as soon as possible, because Dan Hickey, who did the research work on the Haystack cases of badge projects, will be coming, and he's got a huge wealth of knowledge and experience in motivation feedback and that whole area. And which is why he got the MacArthur grant to do that research. And he's moving forward doing a whole lot of things with participatory learning and MOOCs and a whole lot of other subjects. So he's really going to be someone you want to catch when he's here. He'll also be in Sydney, at something in Sydney, which it hasn't yet firmed up, I don't think, but I'll be able to tell people more about that when after the event. I think it's after the Melbourne event. He'll be back here in Sydney, so it's like the 14th and 15th at some events here. So certainly worth hearing some good research that's been done around the Open Badges projects and the kinds of outcomes that they suggest are possible. He's also taking up, there was quite recently a debate, and I'm not sure what conference it was at, but Alfie Cohen made some quite damaging comments about badging and badges and gamification. And Dan Hickey was the rebuttal on the debate against the things that, refuting the things that Alfie Cohen said. And Dan's also going to be continuing that discussion. So if you go look for, there's a really great video of Alfie Cohen in that debate, and then the rebuttal from Dan Hickey about badges and open learning and gamification. And I think it certainly inspires a bit of dialogue anyway. It's quite juicy.
Yeah, I was really inspired by that. I was watching it, and I think the Alfie Cohen video is pretty much required viewing for anyone interested in open badges, because you know, it's a lot of the questions that you're going to get when you try to implement it in your organization or when you try to talk to people about it. And so both watching Alfie's video just to get that and get where you know what the criticism is really helpful, and then watching Dan's video and seeing how he kind of point by point you know, kind of contradicts that, or maybe not contradicts it, but you know, takes another viewpoint on those issues. I think that was really helpful, and I keep telling myself that I need to go back and actually write them down so that I've got them as little, you know, snippets that I can talk to people about. So so I think that's yeah, absolutely require viewing, and I'm not sure. I don't think I added it to the OBAN Scoop It, but I will add it to the OBAN Scoop It as well.
Yeah, it's worth watching. Although I just got angry with Alfie Cohen when I watched the videos. So.
Yeah. I mean, there was definitely a little bit of trolling happening there, I think.
Well, I mean, I was in a room full of educators working in gamification, and the comment was asked that, you know, some of his thinking is fast it's used by. You know, this clutching constantly to the intrinsic, extrinsic polarization or dichotomy is really unhelpful, as Dan points out. Hey, Dean.
Hey, sorry, just got in.
We're just giving everyone a little bit of time to watch the video if they haven't done so. We might have Dustin in the room if they're not speaking.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say that we've got Grant who's in the chat on the Mopad, and he's going to be in and out of the chat. So he didn't want to come onto the Hangout. However, he's asking some questions about the whole Cities of Learning project, and particularly saying, do you think, in relation to Cities of Learning, I'm wondering if issuing badges for holiday or hobby learning might be different in quality to issuing badges for a more formal curriculum. So, and then of course the question is, Grant, you know, what do you mean by quality? Do you mean will the badges be different in quality, or will the process of issuing the badges be different in quality? You know, like there will be different aspects. But you know, what is the difference, or do we need to take into account the difference between holiday/hobby learning and learning as part of a more formal curriculum? Richard?
Yeah, I think I'm happy to speak to that a little bit and maybe get the ball rolling. I think, you know, if you're talking about schools, they already got plenty of formal systems in place to recognize formal learning in school. So that's fine. So if the purpose of open badges is not to recognize informal learning and gaining skills in other areas, I'm really not sure what it is. Does that make any sense? I've lost Joyce. I don't know where everybody else is.
No, I'm here. Sorry, I just turned it off as I just had to step away. Yeah. Oh, so that's interesting because I'm actually, so when I think about badges in schools, I'm thinking they could maybe, you know, replace some of the things that we now do with grades. And I'm thinking you could have a curriculum that was entirely put together from a badge system, you know, so the whole curriculum is badge system, and then people find their own way through the badges. But
Yeah.
I'm not a K through 12 person, so I'm actually going to leave it to you and Dean to come up with some kind of sensible answer.
My first question would be why? Why would you replace the existing system with a badging system? What's the point?
So for me, it's about making. For me, the main benefit for that would be to make the learning pathways much more visible to the students themselves. So they see what they've already achieved, and they can see what the other options are for them to go to. And it would be at a much more granular level as well. So for me, that's where I see a major benefit. But Bron, I know you've thought about this quite a bit.
Yeah, well, an interesting point came up yesterday. I'm getting feedback because I'm using my computer mic. So if people can mute if you're not talking, just so we know we're good there. It came up yesterday that a testament or a statement of attainment really tells you more about the course you took than it tells you about the person's accomplishment. And that was a real aha for me because, you know, if they're past this subject, you can go look up what was in that subject, but you don't know what the person did in that subject or what they presented in that subject. And if they preferred a certain way of presenting that they were very skilled at. So I think there's room there to actually capture a lot more knowledge about the person's competence within a topic than purely whether they've got an A on a grade. For a subject which you can look up all the content of the subject, this is allowing you to look up the content of the person's work. So you can look at what they did to get to that, maybe to that A. I mean, we already have a badge system. A's are badges in one respect, but I really do think they tell us more about the academic offering or the subject or the exam than they tell us about the person's competence. So I think that was one thing for me.
Okay, yeah, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that because if we look at an A that someone is going to take away from a school, it's probably related to a national system of some kind. So you hope that there's a whole series of like moderation and there's a whole authority system behind that, which there isn't with badges. So you reckon that, you know, so it is a question of does that A intrinsically have more value to the person than a badge does? Because to know what the badge is, you've got to know something about the badge issuer. Yeah, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, couldn't what you want to be delivered there more about the learner and more about what they did and what they achieved? Couldn't that be done through portfolios, and then perhaps we do away with both grades and badges altogether? How about that as a kind of devil's advocate position there?
Well, to answer that, there was an interesting point made about e-portfolios, and that everyone kind of has this vision down the track that badges and e-portfolios will be married somewhere. But the interesting point was made also that employers, while they would value a portfolio of someone's, that's not going to get you to the interview. It may get you in reference. People will have the time to dig into it if you've come to their attention already. And so badges, which actually describe your competence, may be something that people can get a very quick visual handle on what you've done. And you're right, Richard, it will depend. There will be badges that, depending on who the issuer is, that may have more value in certain areas than others. And that badge may not actually be from an academic learning organisation. It might be from a trade organisation or an RTO or a group that is specialised in the field that you aspire to work in. But being so visual, it gives you a really good handle on perhaps, you know, the set of skills this person brings. Is this the kind of person you want to offer an interview? And then maybe an employer might dig into their portfolio to see what it is they have to offer. And I thought that was an interesting point, that this is not going to negate the importance of portfolios. It probably makes them even more important.
Okay, at this point, I'd love to hear from Tara, because she just posted that she's working with some schools, and Core Education works very closely with schools in New Zealand who are using badges to complement their curriculum. So not to replace it, but to complement it. Tara, would you like to share a little bit of that work? And I know you're going to be talking about it more. But
look, we're just starting out with some schools that are looking at using badges to complement their curriculum. So one of the schools that I'm working with is a primary school that is up to year 6, and looking at supporting their learners between the Christmas break. So we have 6 weeks here in New Zealand that is holidays, and they find that when their learners come back at the end of January, beginning of February, that they are, well, the gap is noticeable. So they're looking at providing things around their community. So their community is probably less than, we're in the city of Wellington, but their immediate community is probably about less than 1,000, probably 1,500, and they're looking at events that they can offer within that community, such as going to the supermarket or reading books that may support their library in their school. So they'll write a book review on books that they've read, produce QR codes that will go on the books, and then the librarian will issue badges based on the work that the students have done. And similar things, so it's getting to know local knowledge, but also within the school knowledge to keep up that continuity of learning, which is one school. Another school that I have just started working with is a high school, and they're looking at offering it as part of their whole program throughout the school year, and looking at recognising the difference between what they offer as an academic curriculum as well as the soft skills that they offer. So those things that aren't assessed necessarily by a national qualification certificates here in New Zealand, things such as leadership, public speaking, all those sorts of skills. So they're looking at that. So that's sort of one level that we're working with. We're also looking at in terms of professional learning qualifications that for the company that I'm working for. So Core Education's a not-for-profit organisation here in New Zealand that primarily works with teachers, looking at transforming learning and teaching. So we work with schools looking at outcomes for students, but also with teachers. So on one hand, I'm looking at badging systems working with students, but I'm also looking at them with teachers as well.
Can I just jump in quickly and say, if you want to help take notes on the notepad, that would be really appreciated. I kind of wasn't able to jump in and take the notes earlier, and if everyone wants to just help contribute to the notes, that would be fantastic. So sorry to interrupt there. But.
And just because Blair just put an interesting thing in the chat, and Blair, do you want to just throw it into the panel here?
Oh yeah, sure. So I've noticed everyone's speaking as though badges and e-portfolios are completely separate entities, very intrinsically different. To me, they're the same thing. Badges feel more of an evolution of e-portfolios, and therefore there's nothing to meld together because, in a way, they're already the same. But then I'm not an educator.
Thanks for that, Blair. I think for me, they are definitely related, but there was always a problem with e-portfolios, which is they are quite a complex body of work, and that's what we were just discussing. You know, it's really hard to quickly take that in if you're an employer, or maybe not even if you're an employer, just if you're like the next person that is dealing with this person. And so of course, one of the aspects of the badges is the fact that they link back to the evidence of the learning that learner has done. And I think that's really where, for me, when I think about them, that's really where I see them connected, which is that almost the badges become like a shorthand for the skills and achievements, a visual shorthand almost. But if you want to, you can follow it through to the e-portfolio. But that's how they're conceptually linked for me at the moment. But Brian might have heard some other things yesterday, or yeah, wondering what everybody else thinks.
Well, I'd like to throw a question in, and just having watched the video that was our trigger for tonight, it occurred to me to ask the question, do badges only have value if they're publicly displayed? Because everyone is talking about the visual representation, where you're going to put it, is it part of your portfolio? And I'm just throwing that out there as a big, bold question. Do they only have value if they're public?
I'm going to jump on in here and say that we're, as badges as a name, we find as a concept that doesn't quite portray what they are. So here in New Zealand we're using a Māori concept which is called tohu orana, which we're using within core education, which means sort of an indicator of success, which means that they are something that you're proud of, that you're something that you've achieved, whether it's, for example, that you might have, it doesn't matter what level you've achieved, it's something that you're proud of, and that's up to you in terms of your success as to whether what you've achieved. So you might choose to portray that on your e-portfolio or anything else, or you might choose to keep it private, but it's something that you're proud of. So I'm not sure how that helps slightly with your question, but I don't know that it's something that you're intrinsically proud of, is I guess what I'm getting to.
To me, this comes back to gamification, which is a tool to promote learning, and therefore the badges have value through that.
Dean? I think they're singing your song. Sorry, Dean, you're muted.
So I was reaching for the door to turn off the sound of my children arguing over the dishwasher. Certainly giving them a badge to do the dishes isn't going to help. My kind of view generally about the portfolio versus badge, it all comes down to the idea of a portfolio is a symbol and the badge is just a symbol, and they only have meaning if they're interpreted within a particular culture or section of society as such. So I think, to me, that if you're then going to talk about trading badges, then badges are tokens, and I think the question then comes, and what we'll keep asking ourselves is, within, say, a small community, say a techie community or a media community or music or whatever community you're actually talking about, it's going to be quite easy to trade tokens between those groups because they all share a similar value, and they're going to have some worth. If you're then going to try and say, well, what macro value do they have, then I think you're getting into a lot more complex, because then you're talking about how does society start placing values on things, and how does it use tokens and symbols to elevate some people and hold other people back. So the things start moving not just from a pragmatic point of view for me, but they kind of move in a really profound social way into this whole realm of what's meaningful learning and what's a meaningful symbol of that learning. And so to me, I'm a gamer, so I'm interested in small communities that really are interested in producing themselves, almost like guilds and sort of trades guilds, and people that are teaching others to do similar things and maintain something. So I think in that kind of artisan craft kind of old world community, I think badges are really good. But I think there's going to be a huge problem trying to translate those into more macro systems, which are driven by completely different economics and values and all sorts of things. So yeah, I think where there is unmeaningful learning, there's that sort of fetch quest stuff that you can end up doing, which is, if you join a company, for example, they sit there and you have to go through a whole bunch of OH&S training online with some SCORM package, which is completely it's just not meaningful. It's compliant and it's required, but it's not actually meaningful because at the outset, being kind and looking after each other and doing other things that are kind of part of what we hope good culture and good society is. So, to me, this idea that a badge has tokens that lead to an employer turning those tokens into a sum, that's not kind of where I'm at with how I would want to use them personally or where I see the value in them. I think these things are much more tradable between communities, such as photographers or artists or cosplayers or whatever it is. I think they have meaning at that level, but I think it's very ambitious to try and then say, well, these things are going to influence employers, and then certainly e-portfolios is an example of they've had some impact, but it's very patchy.
Well, to build on that, I think I'd like to throw in the other question. Well, first up, I'd like to point out something I thought was fascinating that came up last week. And I mean, we look at, say, people's social connectedness online by perhaps how many followers they have. That's their badge. They have 4,000 followers. They've earned those badges. But interestingly, I received an email asking me if I'd like to buy 5,000 Twitter followers, which I thought was quite fascinating. And so I think how much will a system like this have credibility if unscrupulous markets buy into it? And that's one question. And the second question that comes out of that video, almost every person speaking in that video is looking at the person's future employment or speaking of badges as something to project you into employment. And I found that a little worrying in that, do they only have value to employers, to your career, to your future? Is that all they're about? And that follows on from the public question of, what's the value if it's all about channeling children from what age through a learning environment towards employment? So those are just some thoughts that were buzzing around in my head from the video.
I'll jump in there. That is absolutely, and I find myself doing that as well because it's an easy answer to kind of, when people say, "Oh, what value have they got?" or "Who are you showing them to? Who is the audience?" It's easy to jump to that employer thing, and I think we've always done that with the e-portfolio as well. People say, "Who's going to see the e-portfolio?" and we say, "Oh, the employer's going to see it." So yesterday, what was really interesting, on Monday, I participated in something called Texas EduChat. So this is run by a group of educators in Texas, and they said, "Oh, can you come in and talk about open badges?" And the first thing that I got everyone to do was to share a badge that they had already earned. And I said, this can be a degree or it can be another thing, and it could be anything you want, but brush around your house and find something. And people were sharing the most outlandish things, and I've just posted the link to the archive, but I'm going to go through it and gather all of those different archives and just put them all together in a slide, because it was all sorts of badges. It was things that people had gotten for running a half marathon. That's not the kind of thing that you take to an employer, but it was something that they were inordinately proud of. And I think that was the other interesting thing, is that everybody brought something and shared something that they were actually proud of. And a lot of it was around community participation. So it wasn't around, showing something that they were going to take to an employer, but it was about showing something that reflected their role in their community, in a particular conference or getting a particular blogging badge or something like that. So absolutely, it's very easy to jump to that employer analogy, but I think having some other examples at the ready could be really good. That was just my 2 cents.
Well, there's a really interesting point in the video. Gabe Newell from, I've got to think of the gaming company, speaks, and he says about engineering badges to match the skills that we know players in massively Valve, that's where it's from, designing badges to match sets of skills we know people are developing. And I thought that was an interesting and a different way of engineering it, that these skills are there, they're manifest, we can see them in play, and then offering badges. So gaming companies may start to offer badges, credible badges, for external use outside of their games. And I think, you know, that's another really interesting prospect here. And if I'm a game design employer, then maybe I'm going to put more credibility on someone who's designed in a Valve game or a Valve interface than someone who's got the badge from the University of Wollongong to say they've done Game Design 101. So I think it throws up in the air a lot of the credibility issues that people think academic institutions have.
Can I just jump in there on that and say that I went recently to Interactive Entertainment and Gaming Video Animation College in Sydney. They had Open Day, and they run diplomas in animation, game design, programming, all sorts of stuff. And their graduates have worked on things like Lego Movie, and you know, all sorts of stuff that you've heard about and seen. And what they were saying, which was really interesting, was they have a lot of university undergrads and postgrads that are actually studying at the moment, but they're still taking their course because they know that the credentialing they'll get from the university won't really carry much stock with them when they try and get a job in the industry, and it's still all about that portfolio and that showreel to get them in. So, you know, one aspect I think, you know, dual badging and we're all running a parallel system with school or designing school programs might be a way in which, you know, students that are kind of interested in certain types of career path might be able to show that their interest and their net worth is somewhat more than their, you know, ultimately the HSC or whatever results your system you're running in your school. So, yeah, I think that was quite interesting to me to see.
So I'm just noticing that Richard and Braun have both posted about Steam. Did you want to share anything about that?
Oh, that was just where Gabe Newell's from.
Yeah.
Valve and Steam, the game.
Steam to me is an interesting network because it's a huge social network with young people, and it's massive. It orientates itself around not just game communities but factions of game communities, and within those game communities there's a lot of trading that goes on. So, you know, if you think about in video games, whether you have a fire axe or some other kind of weapon and you can buy and sell and trade those things, there are types of badges and there are types of modifications that you can make to your digital identity. So there are many things inside networks like that that are already functioning as badge systems, but they're not, you know, sort of the sort of typical, you know, sort of Boy Scout kind of visual image that immediately comes to mind. So I think that these things already exist, and I think it's going to be even a challenge, you know, even for Gabe Newell to actually say, well, how do I draw that out of the community? Because kind of the community's kind of going, yeah, well, we already do it. So, like, what's your point? You know, it's kind of, they have to really see a reason to want to take that out of that context and bring it into that macro context. I think that's going to be a challenge for a lot of people.
Well, certainly that is one of the aspects of Mozilla's approach to the open badges, isn't it? That lots of people were doing badges within communities, within systems, but weren't really, you know, but those weren't interchangeable, and you couldn't take them with you. I think it was mentioned before here about, for instance, Deloitte having their own, you know, staff badges, but when you leave Deloitte, you can't take the system, and they don't translate to another system. So I think, you know, even if maybe, you know, the stacked badges could actually be translated into an open badge that you could take with you, I think there would be some value in that. I'm just looking at also in the chat, Grant mentioning badges and school marks, and wondering if badges are a kind of educational Bitcoin. And Dean, you kind of replied to that, said, you know, like, perhaps, but I wouldn't really see, you know, wouldn't really want to be putting badges into an existing structure. But of course, part of that structure, or part of what those institutions have already, is the fact that they've got systems for putting rigor and you know, behind such accreditation. whether that is something that they can build on, and whether that is, having those processes in place could actually put them in a really good position for, not recreating the system they've already got, but adding a layer on top of it.
Well, and a really interesting point was raised yesterday. I was at an event on badging yesterday, and people were saying, there would be validation of badges, so is possible. So, for instance, if I've earned a badge in Harvard for, I don't know, research ethics, perhaps University of Queensland or USQ, whoever, pick a university, may actually verify that badge for the Australian context. So they may actually not be the issuer of that badge, but there may be a reason they would want to verify that badge, so that it would then show, okay, this person has covered research ethics in the same format or context as it is used in Australia, that this matches up. So the badge doesn't necessarily translate in all contexts, and I think that's a point Dean's made about, it's how they're valued culturally and by practices. But there may be area there, because you'll think, okay, a badge from Harvard's going to be the slam dunk, isn't it? It's the one everyone's going to go, oh, that person's got that higher level badge, and that's not necessarily the case. So I think, there's a lot of grey area there in terms of issuing the badge and also who will endorse or validate the badge.
Sorry, I just saw Tara nodding there. I was just wondering if you wanted to chip in on that point.
Yes, I can. I was having a dual conversation at that stage. But for me, it is about that. It's about the recognition between that badge is transferable, that digital credential that you've got sitting in there, the evidence, the learning outcomes, the rubric is transferable. So whether you've got it at Harvard or you've got it at whatever university, it can be transferred, that it's recognisable possibly around the world, but between institutions, that the work that you've done can be more easily transferred than perhaps your academic transcript by going through recognition of prior learning.
Yeah, and that's of course where Deakin is doing quite a lot of work now with issuing badges to students who arrive for RPL. So that's really interesting there. Ron, anything else in the video that you wanted to raise? A final question?
Yeah, I do have one question that kind of bothered me. And Barry Joseph is a really good friend, and he's done work with the museum in New York. And he was talking about who valued the badges when they did this work with students on urban biodiversity. And he was saying the high achievers really valued the badges because they could see the skills to develop. They could see a pathway to things that they wanted to get. They wanted to develop this set of skills, and there they were for them laid out. And at the bottom, he said the traditionally lower achievers valued the badges because they were getting public recognition that for achievement that they may not have experienced in other learning contexts. And the only thing that bothers me about that is, at a point it shows that you, Joyce, earned 10 badges and Ibron earned 3. Isn't there a possibility here that we're just reinforcing that child's picture of themselves as a low achiever? It comes down to that kind of league table kind of idea. Okay, I'm gaining visual recognition, but as kids do, they always compare. How do we deal with that? How do you deal with that in the school context? It's probably not as important in an academic context or a higher education context, but I think it is a worrying thing for lower achievers, because everyone's saying, oh yes, these kids will be able to see their achievement, not waiting to get the certificate at the end or their grade at the end or their school report. But won't the accumulation of badges still show the position of those kids and therefore be self-defeating?
Well, so my first question then is always, well, how does the old system deal with this? Because when we tell students that they're an A student and other students are C students, you know, what does that do? I'm seeing Richard raise his hand, so I'm going to let him jump in.
Yeah, I saw something which might be a similar effect when mathletics, if anybody knows that, started to arrive in the schools. And I was teaching a 7th grade class of not very good mathematicians at that point there, and through the mathematics system, even what we think of as low achievers in maths really felt motivated by being able to compete against people at the same sort of level as they were, and then climb to a new level. So they did find that competitive element that perhaps goes with earning badges and gamification in general, quite valuable, I think. It's hard to say whether if you pushed it too far or you made it too mainstream, whether people would just become very cynical about it. But there certainly were some gains there by the students that I taught, who would be regarded as low achievers, by the other teachers in the school.
Yeah, and of course this is what happens, with the example that everyone always falls back on when they talk about open badges, which is the Boy Scouts badges. But if you're a new young Boy Scout, who's just joined, you're going to be seeing what the other Boy Scouts have already achieved and where they are, seeing what badges they have is going to hopefully inspire you to go and get those badges. But you can also see, through their pathways, you can then see what possible pathways you might take. And I'm seeing that there's some other examples of similar things like mathletics, which Dean is just sharing in the chat there. And I'm sure there are many others like that as well. Like the one that I tend to go back to is like Codecademy. And I think one of the really powerful things that currently we're not seeing the benefits of with the Mozilla Open Badges yet is the fact that as more and more people earn badges, we're going to get more data about people's learning journeys, and they will start to kind of almost show desire lines of how to get to somewhere that you want to be, possible ways. So one of the questions that I get asked all the time by people is, oh, how did you become an education technologist? What did you do to become an education technologist? And the answer is that I started with a bachelor's degree in Celtic studies, which was completely useless. But I rolled into it, and here are the steps that I took. But currently, I can only share that by telling people about it. But if I had had, badges as way markers along the way, and there were other people who had similar roles, and who, you could kind of overlay all of our learning journeys one over the other, you would start to see a common path that we all shared. And so I think that's one of the things that's really exciting about open badges, and something that we just aren't getting from grades and testimers and how we're doing it now. But like we're just seeing the beginning of that. That's nobody is building on that yet. I don't think. Just aware that we've only got.
I just wanted to raise in the video. Paul Pincard says there's possibilities there for people to find someone who's on a similar path to themselves and look at what they've attained, what they've achieved. But I'm wondering, outside of academic learning institutions or schools or wherever, how do you find these people? So is there going, like how will you randomly find someone who's earned badges that you think are something you aspire to? How do you do the people search on that? I think that's do you have any concept of how that's going to work? I thought it was an interesting concept. I just, maybe I'm just dim, but I just couldn't see how that was going to work.
Well, I think one of the things, like if you think about that whole idea of the learning pathways and what did people look for, what did they do next, etc. I think a really interesting analogy would be Spotify and how good Spotify lets you kind of discover new music basing it on all of the data of what everybody else is listening to and what music people group into playlists, and then compiling all of that data to suggest things to you that you might like based on the data that you've given it. And so, so I think if there was a Spotify for open badges, that would be really interesting.
That's a really cool concept. Now you've got me thinking.
All right, so we'll just come to the end, and Bron, since you facilitate this session, I just want to thank you, but also say, are there any final thoughts or anywhere that you want to take this conversation next?
Me or everyone?
You or anyone.
Tara was going to be our next case study on the 17th, but she has prior engagement on that date, so she's shifting into October, which will be cool because that's when she'll actually be running her badge project, and so we're very excited to hear all about that. Do you want to give us a little plug for that, Tara?
Thanks, Bron. I'm working for CORE and looking at running badges not only for our professional learning qualifications for our teachers and looking at how that might feed into postgraduate qualifications, but also looking at how we can help support our learners within the schools. So it's a very ongoing program, starting with our teachers at first and then looking at our schools. So October is a really good date for me because I'll have a lot more information by then. And a lot more in terms of badge design, I have to say, that I thought would be very lightweight, and because the data sitting behind for me is what's important. It's funny how the badge design has taken over my life at the moment, but by the time October comes, I'll have far more information about what we're going to do, and really looking forward to unpacking that with you and having your guys' input as well.
Thanks, Tara. And that whole issue of badge design and a badge as a semiotic item, it came up yesterday in the badges event, and everyone agreed that it's always bigger than you assume it's going to be. It's more important than you assume it's going to be. So we're looking for a case study for this month. So if you know of anyone who's doing something provocative or interesting or thinking about it and would like to share and maybe get feedback from us or ideas from us, they don't have to have their project fully baked. They could be sharing something they're thinking about and using this group as a chance to think around some issues. So we'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, definitely. So, so with that, I just want to thank everyone. Remember that the next session is 2 weeks from now, so that will be the 20th. I'm going to say out of my head. No, that's not right. The 17th. It'll be the 17th, and we are looking for a case study. And of course, tomorrow is the event that Bron attended yesterday, and it will be held in Brisbane again. And if we can find the link, we will tweet it out on OBANS because it will be online on Janison, so it would be possible to dip in and dip out. There is a Melbourne Knowledge Week event which I'm running, which will be at the end of October on Open Badges, and also I'll be at ACEC, which is a school conference which is on in Adelaide at the end of this month, where I'll also be running a Designing Open Badges workshop. So there's quite a few things on, and if you know of others, please do let us know because we like to share them through the OBANS Twitter handle and through the OBANS Facebook. So with that, thank you to our panel. Thank you, Blair, for coming in. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Bron. And everyone can go and relax now. Your evening is over. All right. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Everyone have a good night.
Ko Marie.
Ko Marie.